Cosmetics in your insurance or coverage changes or you tonight, I'm gonna have myself. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It is 1 o'clock and we had an appointment at 1 o'clock. I'm so glad to see you all. I'm so glad to see more cameras being turned on. It's always more lovely to see your smiling, happy, live faces, not your still shots. I can see that on Facebook. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So today we have a fast session for you in our week of devoted to bulletproofing your transactions. And so today's topic is all around handling multiple offer scenarios. For those of you who joined us on Monday for securing the buy side, we did talk about a number of opportunities that you have to improve, to kind of put your best foot forward, make that best offer first, right? And so we're going to start right there today, just kind of continue along the lines of what else are you doing to make sure that your offers are submitted with their best foot forward and strategies you can use to win on that side. And then we're quickly going to pivot to the list side of things and kind of work with you on how are you handling multiple offers as a listing agent? What are the strategies you're using? Answer any questions around multiple offers and how they work and what tools are valid and all that good stuff, and still have you out in less than 40 minutes. Huh, he says confidently. Mary Russo is laughing as hard as she possibly can. She's like, you know what? I have been around long enough to know that 40 minutes is probably not going to happen. But hey, you know what? We're gonna do our best. All right. So let me bring Debbie back to the table. Oh, that's Alice. Wait a minute. There we go. There's Debbie. Okay. Righty. There we are. How are you today, Mrs. Orr? Besides muted?
I am muted. That's how I am. I'm fine. I'm very good.
Excellent, excellent. It's lovely to see you. And so, so knowing the conversation that we had pretty extensively on Monday, was there anything else that we didn't cover on Monday, or that's worth repeating from Monday about really making sure that your buyers are setting themselves up for the win with offer presentation?
So I will repeat and just go back to a couple of concepts. The first being that difference between common practices and best practices. And in my mind, best practices always begin with lots of questions and clarity. You want to have as much clarity as possible, which ultimately makes the whole process simpler.
Yeah, indeed. Because you know the facts, right? You know exactly what you're working with. Mm-hmm. Right. One of the questions that Debbie's talking about might be, you know, we talked about setting expectations on Monday, right? Set expectations early with your buyers about the arena that they're entering. Well, once they find a house that they love, one of the questions might be, okay, so Chris, knowing that we're in a very fast-paced, fast-moving marketplace, how badly do you want, and that you may be one of many offers that show up on this particular property today, how badly do you want to live in that house? Knowing that the list price, you should write this down because it's not written anyplace and it's important that you hear this, that the list price in today's marketplace is the foundational base number that the seller is looking for. The list price isn't just some place to start, right? For most properties that your buyers are going to be making offers on, the list price is the foundational base number that seller is looking to move off of. Would you agree with that, Debbie?
I entirely agree with that. I had another conversation today with a co-broke agent who is beating her head against the wall with a buyer who keeps saying, well, let's just see what they say. And she keeps saying to them, I know what they're going to say. And she doesn't have I think the firm confidence to make a statement like that. And here's what I will say. The market is so dynamic right now, and it changes so quickly. Today's market is still different again from a week ago today. The inventory is just evaporating. So many more houses are coming off the market than are coming on the market. And you can lean on, and I would practice these words and say them as many times as you need to your buyers. It is purely the law of supply and demand. That's a law. It's not a suggestion. And it's what's driving what's going on. And Rick, I think in the Monday session talked about getting them calibrated to being afraid to overpay. You're paying what today's market is going to bear. That's all there is to it. It is today's market. Don't look at what they paid 2 years ago or 10 years ago. Don't look at what their improvements are. It's what's the market today, and can they get a different or better deal anyplace else today? If the answer is no, just go for it. 12 offers, I will say, last week. The least of them, the lowest of them was asking price.
Yeah.
And the house went for 10% higher, 10% higher than asking.
And I think from a standard perspective, you know, the idea of setting some expectations with those buyers to say, you know, look, we're seeing most inventory in most ranges in most towns go for anywhere between 5 and 10% over the list price, right? Are you willing and able to perform at that level in order to come out on top? Right? One of the scripts that I used to use very successfully with winning multiple offers with buyers was, you know, look, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, Debbie, the last thing that I want to do is tell you to use the strategy of spend more money in order to come out on top. However, in this case, that is the strategy that will most propel you to the top of the pile. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to recognize that the list price is literally the foundational base number that the seller is willing to entertain. If there's at least 2 offers on the property, that means somebody is at list price and somebody's above it. You have to decide which one of those you want to be.
And I want to add one more thing, which is sometimes buyers are saying, but that house has been on the market for 3 months or 4 months or 5 months. Doesn't matter. It could sell for full asking price this week. We just had another one that did that.
Yeah,
It baffled me, but it happened.
Time on the market isn't necessarily what it used to be, right? Just because something's been on the market for 30 days, if there's a surge of buyers in that price point, you could end up in multiple offers, even if it's sat for a couple of weeks, right? That's just real, right? And understand, all we're looking to do is communicate to you,
right,
what's really happening out there,
mm-hmm.
right? Shouldn't freak anybody out. Shouldn't make anyone decide that working with buyers is futile at this moment, because none of those things are true, right, or accurate. However, it could mean that you need to have some different skills and different scripts involved and some different expectation setting conversations to make sure that your buyers are prepped for the win, right? I used to also talk about any amount of money over the asking price as insurance.
Right, I like that.
Right, and I think that really helps the buyers understand what they're doing, right? So if there's multiple offers and somebody's at asking price and the rest are above it, again, you have to choose which one you want to be. You certainly don't want to be the one below asking price, because that's a lose situation for most buyers. So the first thing you have to do is decide, are you at asking price or over asking price? And if you're the one who's going to be over asking price, I want you to think of every dollar that you spend over the stated asking price as you buying insurance to make sure you come out the winner. The question is, how much insurance are you interested in purchasing? Because now you're using a script that helps buyers understand. People know what it is to insure themselves, right? They either have life insurance, or they have car insurance, or they have homeowners insurance if they're homeowners now, right? They understand that sometimes you buy more insurance to buy more protection. And so we're using that analogy to help them understand that they're going to insure against other people beating them out on this house the more insurance they purchase. I always found that to be really, really useful to help explain the
paying over the asking price.
the asking, yeah.
Right. There's another concept that I think we need to be mindful of and address perhaps preemptively, and that is sellers have these notions. I don't know if you've experienced this, but it seems like every seller I talk to believes that if somebody is putting down a small amount of money, they may be stretching and they may not be able to afford the house. And sellers have heard enough about things going sideways or south with other sales that they seem to be very sensitive to creating a transaction that has some certainty to it. So having that conversation with your buyer to maximize what they can put on the table so they look like they're not stretching, skimping, looking like semi sort of kind of qualified, as strong as they can make that offer, that will be very helpful, and deliberately, not just going in and hoping for the best, but really making a statement that perhaps they're, as Karen said the other day, having a pre-approval letter for more than what they're looking for. It used to be the opposite. You didn't want them to go too high because the seller would think, oh, well, they can afford more. But now you've got to make them look uber qualified, I believe. And I don't think it's a bad thing to have a higher qualification letter than the price that they're going for.
Yeah. So two quick things on that. And guys, just like on Monday, if you have questions, just pop them in the chat, or pop in the chat that you have a question, and we'll be certain to call on you for that question. But two things on what Debbie just said. First, be careful that you're not stuck in a world that no longer exists, right? And specifically to what Debbie was pointing out, we used to live in a world where so many of the things that we've been talking about Monday and then again today would have been seen as kind of tipping the cards, right? Tipping your hand to the sellers, and oh my goodness, we don't want to project or intimate that we might be willing to spend more money. Guys, in today's marketplace, where multiple offers are the norm and ridiculous amounts of multiple offers are common, that whole like tip the hand, let's be coy about what we really want to spend and what we can spend, that's all gone out the window. Right? You need to, as we said on Monday, you need to show up being the strong man. You need to visibly look like the strongest player in that group of people so that you get the attention. So be careful that you're not helping the buyer stay like cloak their true intentions in some sort of secrecy, or holding out for the extra $10,000 till the very end. The very end is the beginning, right? And so be clear about that. And I did have a second something or other that I'm sure brilliant, but I know what it was. And so I can't remember who it was on Monday. It might have been Nick, or I'm not sure is here again today. But somebody put out, it almost sounds like you're kind of resigning yourself and the buyers to just paying the most possible. And I thought about that comment that evening, and my answer to that is one of the strategies. So A, yes, that might be true, right? That might be true for certain buyers if they're really interested in winning. Some of the strategies push them out and say, this is my strength. And so if they're willing to pay $500,000 on a 450 house, and they go in that way, well, then they're paying $500,000 on a 450 house, right? If they're living there, the extra cash out of pocket, if they can afford it and they decide that that's where they want to live, in a monthly payment, it's not all that much difference, right? So the numbers clearly still need to work. But the other thought I had was something that we should talk about today, and that is one strategy to go in really strongly and still protect yourself off the top is the escalation clause. Right, Debbie, I think you said on Monday something to the effect of, escalation clauses used to be like a secret weapon that we talked about and not a whole lot of other people did. And what are you seeing now with escalation clauses?
Almost every round of multiple offers has at least one that has an escalation in it. And they vary, but if you write an escalation clause, make sure that you make one of the conditions based on verifiable, the highest verifiable offer that's on the table.
Yeah, indeed. So a couple of questions about defining the escalation clause. So let us define that for you for those who have never heard that term before. An escalation clause is exactly what Debbie just mentioned. It's where you go in. So on this $450,000 house, your offer from your buyers is not a number per se. Instead, it's $5,000 over the highest verifiable offer, up to $490,000.
Right.
So if there's 6 offers on the property and 3 of them are at 450 and 2 of them are at 465, and you're the 6th one in, and yours is 5,000 over the highest verifiable offer, your offer is now by default 470. So instead of so if you were willing to pay 490, right? If everybody else is a little bit lower and you're willing to go to 470, that could help you strategically not have to go to your max using that escalation clause. That makes sense? Yes, Kathy.
So when you say verifiable offer, how do we verify?
Yeah, so we want to see the other offer that you're basing it off of. The listing agent can certainly redact a name, but the rest of it should be intact, and so that we can see it, and so the buyers can see it, so everyone feels comfortable knowing that they're going $5,000 over where somebody else ended.
What if they don't feel comfortable sending us that offer and they just tell us it's 475 or whatever it is?
No, we want to see it.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
can show it to us.
Have you tried that and they've sent it to you?
They
Have you had any
can show it
resistance?
to you. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
I have a question on that too. Is it obligatory for the seller to, on that escalation clause conversation, to send us in writing the higher amount? Is it mandatory?
So let's be clear about how the escalation clause works. It is not obligatory or mandatory or any kind of law on the seller's side to even entertain escalation clauses, right? Sellers could decide to tell their listing agent, hey, you know what, this whole escalation clause thing, I want to work with numbers. So, these 2 people that said escalation clauses, I don't even know what that means. So please go back and tell them to just resubmit with an actual number. Can a seller choose to do that? Yeah, absolutely. And so then as the buyer's agent, what is your next step with your buyer? Debbie, if I gave that information to you as a listing agent, you're the buyer's agent, what would you counsel how would you counsel let me restate that. What would the conversation be with your buyer?
It would be, what is the price that you are willing and happy to pay to obtain this house? And we are going to have to put it on paper now.
Oh, but what about that fun whole escalation clause thing? I really liked that.
So in today's world, we need to play by the rules that the sellers are willing to play by, and they have asked us to give them a real number. So what is that number that you are willing to pay for this house to give you the best shot at winning it?
Well, why do they get to make all the rules? What about me?
Have you ever heard the term buyer's market, seller's market?
I have.
So, and we used to be in a buyer's market, and who do you think was driving the bus in the buyer's market?
Yeah, so maybe I missed my shot at that, huh? Okay, got it.
That ship had sailed.
Right. So guys, remember, sometimes people feel kind of picked on, like, well, how come they get to make all the rules? Well, because they're holding all the cards. They have the inventory, right? And it's not as easy for you to say, you know what, I don't like what that seller has to say. I'm going to go buy one of the other 17 properties that meet my criteria.
Okay, go find one.
Exactly right. Right. So Dan, I hope that answers the question, is that there is no obligatory on the listing side. In order to answer your question further, if in fact they are entertaining a
Escalation clause.
escalation clause, there is still no rule, law, or obligation for the seller to then, or the listing agent to say, okay, well, we're going to show you this deal. So so here, let's just role play this. I'm going to go back to Debbie and say, okay, so the seller has said they're going to accept your offer. Their highest offer was $465, which means it's $470 to your folks, and they're unwilling to verify an offer. Please let me know what your folks want to do.
They can take it or leave it.
Right? So then it's a conversation that Debbie has with her buyer client, saying they're willing to say yes to 470. They're just unwilling to send you the verification. Are you willing to say yes to 470, or are you willing to say no? Right? Again, we're always the options people. We bring the information and the options back, and they choose the path forward.
And in that situation, if I were a buyer's agent, I would ask the listing agent a bunch more questions before I went back to the buyer. Okay, I get it. You don't want to share that offer with me. Would you share with me how many offers did you get? And where did we really fall within that range? And just ask. There's no rule against asking questions. You may or may not get answers. And that they don't have to give you answers. A lot of times they do. I'll tell you what, sellers agents who are in this situation are kind of excited too, and they sometimes talk a little bit more than they should.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So a couple of requests in the chat to send out the language on that. I'm almost certain, I will verify, but I'm almost certain that a version of that lives inside of DocuSign and in Command. I'm nearly certain that we had that uploaded. So again, I will check for you after the fact, but there should be a document that actually outlines the language for an escalation clause in DocuSign and/or Command. It's not necessarily a fill-in-the-blank form, right? But there is language that you can utilize. I'm nearly certain. I'll verify it for you. And so a couple of other questions in here. Let's just look real quickly. Eric, I'm going to answer your question when we get to the list side conversation. Elena, yeah, and Elena, I'm going to address underpricing, or the strategy of pricing ahead of the market on the list side as well. Yes, okay. So when do you disclose the escalation clause? With your offer from the buyer? So yes, it is the offer, right? So it's instead of writing up an offer at 470, you're going to write up an offer that says $5,000 over the highest verifiable offer. And then if they want to cap it, they can cap it. They don't have to cap it, but they can certainly with a maximum number of 475 or whatever that happens to be. So yes, that is the offer that gets submitted. It's not after the fact. Next question: when appraisal comes, I'm not sure I understand the question there. I'm gonna guess what you're asking. Are you asking when the what is the appraiser actually appraising to?
No, you're trying to buy the house that is listed for 465, and you're paying X amount. And if it doesn't appraise with your escalation clause, what happens then? Back to the table.
Well, so the same I'll give the same answer to that question as I gave on Monday. I think far too many of us are far too worried about appraisals. And I would encourage you to not be worried about appraisals. Know that it's a possibility, have the conversation so it's not a surprise. But in the last 3 months, because of what's happened in our market, we are seeing appraisal issues literally almost vanish, right? In the first 3 months of the summer, after the lockdown, when the market was going crazy and there was nothing to back it up, we were struggling a little bit more. But certainly since the fall, we've seen less of that come to the table. So the answer is, if there's an appraisal issue, you have a couple of different paths. You can argue the appraisal. You can have the buyers just simply take the loan off of the appraised value and bring a little bit more money to the table, right? They're still paying the same amount. They're just the cash to close gets jockeyed around a little bit. And I want to make sure that everyone heard that. If the appraisal comes in low, the buyer can still buy the house for the number that they chose to purchase at. That it doesn't change the math. It doesn't change the math. It just changes when you bring money forward. And I think Tammy unmuted to talk a little bit about that. Tammy, go ahead and give us a little more info on that.
I was just going to say that there's no more, like, the appraisal issue isn't any more of an issue as it was before all this happened. So just like it was a problem before, it could be a problem now, but it's just as unlikely now as it was then. And to your point, the summer, and there was only one time in the summer I had a problem and I fought it and we won. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
And I'm going to repeat something I said on Monday, which is, as the buyer's agent, it is as much in your and your client's interest to, how shall I say, package your comps to validate the sale price.
Yeah.
What do you're supporting your buyer who made a decision by reinforcing that price and looking for comps to justify the price. Don't try to play a game with pulling it down. That's not relevant in this market.
Yeah, and you just end up shooting everybody in the foot. Remember, the buyer said, I want to buy that house and I'm willing to pay up to $470,000 for it. So you're not doing anyone favors uncovering the loan comp that's going to screw everything up, right? That you're riding in on a white horse when no one's asked you to ride in on a white horse.
Exactly right. Mm-hmm.
Right. So instead of saving the day, you end up killing the day. Here's the other thing I want you to be really cognizant of, and this isn't just about appraisals, it's about anything in your business. Frankly, I think it's a way to live your life. But now I'm preaching a little bit. So the idea is this: solve problems when they present themselves, not before. Right? An appraisal doesn't matter if you don't win the house. Right. So the appraisal, the potential of an appraisal problem only exists if you're the buyer who gets the house, right? So that's the focus first. Win the house, then go through the process. And if something pops up, we'll handle it, right? So Eric had a question. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, quick question on the what you call verifiable offer. Does that include all the conditions around the offer? Because it can be a cash offer at the same amount. It can be with an FHA loan. It can be any combination of everything. So how do you define a verifiable offer? That was my question. Thanks.
Well, so if you're on the buy side, right? Really, the only thing that's necessary to justify the $470,000 price that you're being asked to pay is an offer that was made at 465, whether it was financed or cash or closing in 6 months or closing in 6 days. All the rest of it becomes sort of irrelevant. You're only verifying the price because that's what your escalation clause refers to. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, but it gives me, as a seller, less assurance that, you know, my bid is more secured than the other offers that are on the table. That's what I think. I mean, if I would say, okay, I'm offering 470 and I'm going to go in all cash, well, as a seller, I would be delighted. You know, if I say, well, I'm going 470, but contingent on appraisal and on loan, that's less secure for me as a seller.
Well, yes, but the seller gets to make that choice. The seller's looking at all the offers on the table, and they're going to choose this one with the escalation clause.
Okay.
And they've seen everything else, right? The seller has all the information. The verifiable part of it is back to the buyer's agent. The seller sees everything and has made a choice that that's the one they want. Or else the buyer's agent who has the escalation clause wouldn't be getting the phone call saying we're moving ahead with you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to add, what matters here is the seller's logic. It has to make sense to the seller. It doesn't have to make sense to any of the buyer's agents. The only one it has to satisfy and make sense to is the seller, not the seller's agent, not the buyer's agent, not the buyers, the seller. And he may have his own little world that he's working in. He may take less money for cash. He may not take less money for cash.
I have a question.
Yes, Mary.
With regard to running comps to substantiate the offer. I'm finding that I run comps and they don't substantiate the asking price these days. The prices are all going up constantly. And it makes it almost difficult for me to sometimes speak with my buyers about, I know that none of these other houses within the half-mile radius have been at this price, but the market has changed. It's a seller's market. It's going up all the time. So, I mean, I guess my question is, how do you provide the comps if they're not there yet? And you know the house is going to sell because it's happened with every offer I've made over the last few months.
Well, and so I think you talk about that kind of history, and you talk about the multiple offers, and and almost everything is in either multiple offers or has had a lot of traffic around it. And you know there are more buyers than there are sellers. So the other thing, Mary, I always will be going right now. I always go at least $50,000 over the asking price and back my way down. And usually you can find, I have been finding surprises in that 50,000 over. And you can squint a little bit and make one or two of them work.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and to be clear, like, so we're talking about two different things, right? We started talking about providing comps to the appraiser. And Mary's question was really more about providing comps to the buyer to help justify them moving forward, right? So, and those are two separate conversations, because the conversation that Debbie just outlined for you is the conversation you're having with your buyers. That conversation with the appraiser is kind of meaningless because, well, except for the fact that multiple offers are on the table, right? Make sure that if the appraiser is coming to appraise the property your buyers have just purchased, that appraiser knows that there were multiple offers. And if you can find out how many and how many were over asking, that's information that the appraiser needs to have. Hey, and if you've used an escalation clause and you have a document that says somebody else was willing to pay $465, right? So now you're able to justify some of those numbers so the appraiser understands that the market is driving these numbers up.
Here's something else that's driving the market right now, and it's buyers who have lost 2 or 3 or 4, or Donna Gilbert tells a story about 11 houses that they lost. They have a very different mindset about what they're willing to pay. And that needs to be communicated to anybody who it matters to there are buyers out there who are going to step up that way. And when your do you want to have your buyers lose 4 to 11 houses before they get there? Or do you want to help them shorten that learning curve?
Quick commentary on 11 buyers, 11 houses that we lost. Okay, that is a slow learner. I'm sorry, that is a slow learner. My stars. And so let's talk about one other quick strategy, and we're going to pivot over to the seller side. One other quick strategy: if in fact you're struggling with helping buyers understand that they will likely need to pay 5 or 10%, or be prepared to pay 5 or 10% over the stated asking price, some of you may need to have conversations with your buyers about reducing the price range they're looking in. Right? If you have someone who can afford up to 450 and you're showing them properties up to 450, well, that doesn't work so well. They're going to keep losing because people who can afford more than that are looking in that price range and paying 475 to 495. There's that 10% showing them. So you may need to have a conversation with some of your buyers saying, let's do it strategically, let's put you in a better position to win. And so instead of looking up to 450, let's look up to 400. Let's find you the best property at 4 or 410, so that when you have to bid up to that 445 or 450, that really is your max. You're now playing the game of up to 10% higher than the asking price. And so you come out on top. So don't hesitate having a conversation that adjusts the price point or the expectations of the buyer to help them be in a position to win. I've seen that work a lot with a lot of your colleagues over the last 6 months. So Debbie, as we pivot over into sellers, let's just answer a couple of quick questions in the chat. Kathy asks, how do we really know that there are multiple offers? Should the seller sign something? I'll give the same answer to that as I gave on Monday. The answer to that to me is, how do you know? You trust. How do you communicate that to your buyers? You use a script around trust. You know, Debbie, I can see that question oftentimes gets asked. Here's what I can tell you. We live inside of a highly regulated industry that is driven by an agent's license. And I personally would never put my own license at risk by saying something that simply was false or untrue. And so I choose to trust that the information that the listing agent is communicating to me, based on what I just said to you about rules and codes of ethics and licensure to earn a living, I choose to trust that the information that's coming back to us is factual. And I encourage you to do the same. That's what I used to say to buyers when they asked. Kathy asks whether the seller should sign something. I really frown upon that. And I frown upon that because I think it creates an aura of distrust and contentiousness inside of a transaction that, even if they do choose you, doesn't go away. And so I choose trust as the answer to that question.
Hey, Rick, speaking of trust, should we trust the disclosures?
Yes. Yes, you should trust what's being put in front of you until someone gives you a reason not to, right? Let's be clear about something. And I'm sorry if this takes a turn. I don't mean it for it to go where some of you might connect to. We live in a world that is sort of anti-facts nowadays. And I think we need to get back to a place of people telling the truth and accepting facts for just facts' sake. I don't live my life in the world of paranoia, right? I choose to trust that the things that are put in front of me are true until or unless I have a reason to believe otherwise. If someone gives me a good reason to think it's false or fabricated, then I may ask some additional questions. But I think we create a very slippery slope and a massive world of distraction away from getting the job done if we start to distrust the things that are being told to us and the things that are being put in front of us. Again, I'm sorry if that sounds like me preaching a little bit, but I'll tell you, trust is a choice, and I choose it more times than I don't. Do you have a different thought on that, Deb?
I do not. I entirely agree with that. And I think it's the other thing we talked about the other day was being part-time firemen. Um, keeping the level of emotion and excitement and drama low, because there's no advantage to it. It puts everybody at, literally, it puts people at a disadvantage to come in as contentious. This is not a contentious, we're not adversaries. We're advocates and professionals.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I'm going to throw one other thing out that Lori put in the chat that I want to make sure everyone hears, because I think it's really smart. If buyers have an opportunity to obtain gifts from family, now's the time.
Mhm.
Call it on in, like calling all grandparents.
That's right. Yeah.
Because now's when they need the extra cash to be able to win. And I would encourage you, because of the way, and maybe Tammy can speak better to that, but I would encourage the gift to be made sooner rather than later, so it can be documented and be sitting in someone's account, so you don't have to go through all the rigmarole of seasoned money and all that stuff, right? So if someone's heading into the market and they think they're going to get money from grandma or grandpa, have them talk to one of our mortgage partners, right? Tammy can walk them through all of that with them about what they need to do to document it, but now is the time. Don't wait. Get it up front. Great, really good point, right? And I like Alice's coda on the top to that conversation about trust. It's hard to conduct business. I would almost change that word, Alice, to impossible to conduct valid, growing business if you don't trust anything that you see or hear. I agree with that. I agree. All right, so Deb, pivoting over to the seller side in our remaining minutes. Oh, well, we're already out of time, but anyone who wants to stay for some seller conversations, what strategies are you personally using as a listing agent to make sure that? Well, let me ask you this question first. There is really one goal, as far as I'm concerned, one goal as a listing agent handling multiple offers. And that goal is to make sure everyone feels treated fairly.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that assessment, that that's the number one goal?
Oh, I think that's essential. That's absolutely essential. And it's the foundation of completing a successful transaction, because you may be successful with the offer that is selected. I'll tell you, having multiple offers, whether it's 2 or 20 that you're choosing from, is no bed of flowers. I mean, that can be as fraught with challenge as having no offers and having to figure out how to draw an offer out of somebody. Would you agree with that? Anybody who has had those multiple offers? Because how do you know you're picking the right one? Holy cow. Is there one right offer? Probably more than one right offer. That would go all the way to a right offer being something that's going to go all the way to the closing table.
Yeah. And I say what I said for a reason, because oftentimes when I'm discussing or teaching multiple offer strategies, I'll ask the question in a classroom to say, okay, as a listing agent, what's your main goal? And most of the answers come back to get the seller the highest price. And that, to me, is not the main goal of the listing agent. The main goal is to counsel and work with the seller on strategies that will have everyone feeling as though they are treated fairly, and then also have the seller choose a price and terms offer that makes the best sense for them. But you don't get there if everyone feels like you're screwing around.
So how do you start the process? And today, almost any house that goes on the market is eligible for multiple offers, as long as it's priced not ridiculously out of the market. It's likely going to get more than one offer. So it starts at the very beginning with a strategy with your seller. What we've been doing is suggesting that they go on the market on Wednesday. We schedule an open house on Sunday, and we say at least we're going to go through Sunday before we accept any offers.
I hope everyone wrote that down, because that is the strategy du jour. That was worth you spending 46 minutes here.
Mhm. And we just do that every single time. Have we come up empty? In the fall, we came up empty a couple of times, but in January and February, we're not coming up empty.
Well, and you come up empty because not every single strategy works 100% of the
That's
time.
correct. That's
Right.
correct.
If you're looking for something that works 100% of the time, you are constantly going to be disappointed, right? So I would encourage you to find strategies that work most of the time and utilize those in conversation and consultation with your sellers. I love that. And then Debbie, do you also have a conversation with your seller around how you'll actually address the multiple offers? Because there's a couple of different strategies one can use. Do you have a conversation ahead of time about how you'll address or manage the multiple offers?
Yes, and we talk about them getting to choose the way to do this. Usually what I find is the seller will say, well, I'm going to look for your direction because you've done this more than I've done. But you can certainly choose, you can choose a lot of different strategies. One, to just look at the highest and best offer and just work with that one. The second is to choose them as they come in. You can just do them sequentially as they come in. The way we've been doing it most recently is we give every buyer agent a deadline and say, we'll be addressing, we need your offer by a certain point in time, 5 o'clock on Sunday or 10 o'clock on Monday. And we'll be addressing all of the offers at one time. And then we'll be responding to you by 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon.
Yeah. And so did you hear some of those strategies? The one I want you to really underline, because this also harkens us back or takes us back to the buy side, is where Debbie said, sometimes it's the first one to the table is the one the sellers choose to work with. And they look to, regardless of what else comes in, some sellers believe that if you were first, you have a right to negotiate with me. And so maybe they'll come and ask for numbers that they are seeing with other offers, right? So I want nobody to be surprised in today's day and age that if you make an offer of $410,000 on a $400,000 house, that the seller comes back and says, look, we're going to counter you at $425,000. That exists. The seller has every right to do that. It's not weird. We just call that Wednesday nowadays. And so the idea of being prepared for that, A, and B, recognizing that first to the table can be a winning strategy if you represent the buyer. I will tell you personally, the last 3 investment properties I purchased, I made full price or over full price offers sight unseen the day they came on the market, and then scheduled my inspection for the very next day or within 48 hours if it wasn't possible for next day. And I saw the house at the inspection. Well, one of them, I saw the house at the inspection. One I've still never seen. I sent my property manager and he saw the house, right? So I get that sometimes with investment properties, there's maybe a little bit different there. But as a buyer, I've made 3 sight unseen full price or better offers because I wanted to be first. If I changed my mind at the tail end, or as I walked through the property, I could then save that as a contingency and exit the transaction that way. But some of those things you need to communicate to your buyers to say, how are we going to get you there first? Make the offer, then go see the house. That sometimes works. What else on the seller side, Deb?
Well, the thing that you have to, again, remember is there are sellers all across the spectrum. Different things are important to different people. People are people. People is people. And it's just, and they get to choose how they're going to handle these things. Some people, it's all about the family, and they'll talk to you about who they want to buy their house. They want somebody to raise a family in their house. And that's the buyer that they're going to want to focus on. Some people well, they stepped up to the plate. I really respect somebody who takes a stand and that's what they believe. And so you let them live with their beliefs. And some people, it's all about the dollar. And some people, it's all about the security of the transaction and that they can see that this is a solid, well-qualified, and they just burrow down on that kind of detail.
And here's what's so important about what Debbie just said, and then Alex, I'll come to you for your question. You have to remember that if I'll use myself as an example. For me, I'm that seller that's kind of all about the dollars. I could care less who buys my house. I don't care what I'm going to do with it once I don't live there. It's not mine. Who cares? Right? That's how I look at things. Be very careful that you don't project how you would handle something as a seller onto the sellers that you represent. Right? So you have to instead ask some questions around that. What makes the best sense for you? What criteria might you use to vet the best offer for you? Right? It's about what's best for them and their comfort level. Even if you're looking at it like, oh my goodness, you're going to choose that one, you're going to leave $25,000 on the table. Why on earth would you do that? You can have all of those conversations all inside of your head. But what actually comes out is, so recognizing that you're choosing this one, I just want to point out that this one and this one from a financial perspective, from a numbers perspective, this one and this one would maybe put more money in your pocket. Are you comfortable and confident that this is the right one for you? Yes, absolutely. Great. And then we move forward. You still have a job to point out the differences, but you don't have a job or a responsibility to jam your thoughts about the offers down their throat.
I had somebody today who wanted to make like a really impulsive decision about somebody. And I had to say, okay, that's fine. If this is the path you want to go down, that's great. Let's reel back in just a little bit and make sure that we've done more vetting of this offer before we sign and seal our names on it.
I love that. So you're advising kind of the second look, right?
Mhm.
Let's just go through it one more time. Right? Again, you're not necessarily trying to push one way or the other. You just want to make sure that they have made a decision based on all available facts.
Mhm.
Right? I teach this in Ignite. Those of you in Ignite, you can answer this question, like, what is our job description? To interpret current conditions such that the client can make the best decision possible for them. That's what we do for a living. Are you helping someone interpret the current conditions? In this case, as a listing agent, interpret everything in front of them with all 12 of these offers, 3 of these offers, whatever it is, so that they are making the best business decision possible for them, right? As Dario points out in the chat, for a lot of people, it's principles over business. It's not about the almighty dollar. It's about
100%.
buying
Yep.
the property,
Mhm.
about respecting the person that was there first, right? That is so true for a lot of sellers. Alex, you had a question. Let me circle back to you.
Okay, so you said something and I was not sure if I misheard you. You said that it's possible, I believe you said, it's possible that if you brought a $400,000 offer, a seller could come back and say, we're countering you at 400, which was a listing number. We're countering you at 425.
Yep.
On
That
the
is what I
first
said.
rounds. With
Yes.
or without any other offers?
If they choose, sure.
I mean, yeah, so, is that changing the price?
Keep asking that question. I'm not sure I understand it.
If the listed price is 400 and you've submitted an offer for 400 or 401 or 10 or whatever,
Yeah.
and the response in the negotiation is, that's lovely, we love you, but we would like 425, which is their right, but you've satisfied all of the conditions of the listing price.
Uh-huh.
And there's no other offers. Debbie, are you with me? No?
Well, would it happen if there were no other offers? I'll tell
I
you,
don't-
I've
yeah.
had sellers do this stuff because they
Okay.
get this notion that they've underpriced the house. and
okay.
They are looking for a higher number now.
Okay, so
I've
that
had that
totally
happen
freaked me out, but that happens.
Several times in this last year. No joke.
Okay,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no reason, yeah, there's nothing holding them back from doing that.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
The only thing that might hold someone back is the fear of a response of, what are you nuts? We're out of
Right.
here from the
Right.
buyer, right? Because that could happen as well.
Sure.
But the reality is the seller and the buyer get to make these choices back and forth. Sometimes you make good choices, sometimes you make bad choices, like sometimes your choices will make you. But there's nothing, and I'll tell you, the reason that I say this out loud is because 3 or 4 months ago, when this kind of started to happen, maybe it's more like 6 months ago now, when this really started to happen, I would get calls almost daily from a lot of you guys saying, wait a minute, I asked if there were multiple offers and they said no, and then the seller countered higher than the asking price. And I said, so do your buyers want to buy it at that number, or do they want to do something else? Remember, they always have ARM, accept, reject, modify. That's the tool that every seller and every buyer is armed with. Make sure you remind them of that. So here's what's come back, Debbie, from your offer. You've made an offer of 410 off of a $400,000 list price. The seller is countering at 425. That may surprise you. However, the market is dictating that things are moving very quickly, and that's the number they'd like to settle on. You have 3 choices. You can say yes to that. You can say no, and we can go find something else, sort of. Or you can decide to modify and present a counter, and perhaps we can settle at 418 or something like that. Which would you prefer to do? Debbie, before you go there, I just want to make one other comment about this. That's a different conversation than when I go back to Debbie and say, you're not going to believe this. This is what the listing agent told me. This seller is nuts. I don't know what they're thinking about. Like all the hair on fire drama that sometimes gets communicated from us to our clients. When you do it that way, what is the client supposed to think? The only thing they can think is that somehow is not right and they're being taken advantage of. And the only reason they got that information or heard that information that way is because that's what you told them. So be really, really careful about how you react and respond to the things that are said to you. This is all even keel objectivity. We're passing along information, presenting some options, and then responding back. Don't have it raise or lower your pulse in any way. It's not worth your time, effort, and energy, and it can create issues with success with the clients. Sorry, Deb, I cut you off. Go ahead.
So I'm going to continue down a similar path. I'm going to ask everybody on the call to put your purely objective hat on and give me a forecast of housing prices in Fairfield County in the next 6 months and then the next 12 months. Where do you think housing prices are going to go?
Well, the Wall Street Journal was very clear on that, very interesting article specifically on the state of Connecticut. And they're saying that this will continue all the way through 2021 and into the spring of 2022.
The Wall Street Journal, huh?
They
Interesting.
know a thing or two.
Okay, so now how are you advising your buyers? And if you have a seller who is selling today, what is your job to support what he's going to walk away with?
Well, my strategy would be we have to buy now because 6 months from now, you're going to be paying another 50 grand. So it's a question of, can they do that or not? But certainly the advice is to do things now while you can. Otherwise, pay more later.
So,
and I think Rick said that on Monday. So it's a pretty simple strategy, but it's the only way to go right now. It's just a crazy market out there.
Does anybody see the irony in the conversation? What was our conversation 1 year ago? And I mean 1 year ago.
The exact opposite.
It was exactly the opposite. And what happened? Something else happened. So that right now, sellers who were trying to time the market look like geniuses. So we can't make any guarantees in the market. And yet what Dan said is exactly what I would suggest. There's a lot of evidence that prices are not going to stay where they are or drop in the foreseeable future.
So I want to throw one more thing out. We'll open it up to questions because it is 2 o'clock. We'll open it up. We'll stay on as long as you have questions or as long as you guys choose.
And I want to make one more comment as well.
Yeah, so my closing comment is, especially on either side, but especially as the listing agent, please err on the side of over communication. One of the ways that you make sure that people feel like everything is being done fairly is to constantly update all of the buyer's agents, even if you have nothing else to report. Right? Another couple of hours goes by and there's no word back from the seller. They're still working it through. Shoot a quick text out to all the buyer's agents to say, hey, just want you to know, I haven't heard back from the sellers yet. I do expect that we'll know this afternoon or this evening. Just wanted to keep you informed. Over communicate, because remember, they have anxious buyers, which makes them anxious. And so they'll be on you. And the second they don't get information in what they feel is a timely fashion, that's when all the accusations start flying about there's favoritism. They're working with only their own buyers now. Nothing's fair. You're mean, terrible, horrible. Right. So over communicate. That's my parting shot.
And mine is tagging right along behind it. And it is when you project hours out or project when the next communication is going to be, give yourself a little bit of leeway. Don't, because things happen and the seller's not available to have the conversation that you thought you were going to be able to have. And then it's half a day later, and sometimes it's half a day later, and people get nervous. And the final thing is, every single person who's made an offer must receive a response. Silence is absolutely not acceptable. You have to let them know when the decision has been made. And what I always say is, if anything goes sideways on this transaction, we really do appreciate your offer. There's no reason to be, haughty or nasty or whatever. We really appreciate your offer. And if anything goes sideways, I will reach back out to you. And if you have questions along the way, reach back out to me and just take my temperature and see what's going on. I'm happy to respond.
Yeah, that's massively important. We keep hearing issues coming up with agents not returning phone calls, and like, well, but they didn't win. Like, well, but they still need an answer. They have to know they didn't win, right? So it's rude, it's unprofessional, and frankly, guys, it's just lazy. It's just lazy not to give people an answer, right? So make sure that that's not you.
Yeah, it's very disrespectful, I think.
Yeah. Indeed. All right, so that is the content that we had for you today. Are there any questions that would be helpful for us to answer before we head off? You can pop them in the chat or unmute. Questions that came up that we didn't answer. Lisa, go ahead.
I have found winning in multi-offer, and we execute the binders, and there's certain binders that have legalese in it, and then they are a legally binding contract, but I don't see too many of those around. So the one I used was just a standard binder. Another offer came in. They came back and the seller's attorney said, nope, it's not binding. Tell them they have to pay this new higher offer, and we'll let them have it. Otherwise, we're giving it to the other one. So what I have found, and I tell my clients, is key is get to contracts ASAP and push the seller's attorney to get those contracts out and get them executed within 48 hours. There is absolutely no reason you can't have fully executed contracts that quickly.
Yeah, agreed. Move things fast so that there's less opportunity to have the circumstances change, because circumstances can shift and change.
Would we ever consider putting in that legalese in our binder to get it to be?
Well, so here's the answer to that. You always have three options in terms of how you write your offers. You utilize a standard offer to purchase, which is utilized typically from about mid-Fairfield County and north, is the offer to purchase. That states in it, it's not a contract. You can use the purchase agreement, which is typically used from mid-Fairfield County down along the coast, more than that, which does on page 2, paragraph 4, have some language in it that says this is a contract that is binding until or unless it's replaced by an attorney's contract. Or you can use the standard 4-page contract in the MLS, which is not used very much in Fairfield County, but it's used everywhere else in the entire rest of the state, right? And then if you're in a specialty market like Greenwich, who typically uses more like a letter of intent, right? You can build things in. The point is you have to weigh the pros and cons of those documents, because when you choose a document that might protect the buyer from having the property pulled out from under them, you also may put them at risk in a multiple offer situation of the seller not choosing them because they want the options of something else coming in. So it's a seesaw of risk. And so that's just a conversation that you get to have with your buyer clients about what they think the best path forward is for them.
Okay.
What did I miss, Deb?
I think we're good.
Okay, good.
I will reiterate, using command to do a comparison of multiple offers takes some time. I'll tell you, I used to have to print out all of the documentation and had been known to take a notebook full of offers to review in person with a seller. Command makes it so much easier to just do the summary and then share the documents with the offers that are under consideration.
Love it. All right, we have a question from Eric, which is going to be the end of it, end of our session today. Before we get to Eric's question, remember that Debbie does have, for Ignite students and anyone else who chooses to join her at 3 o'clock on Wednesdays, so that's in just about a little less than an hour from now, a command session. What are you addressing today in command?
We're going to work on opportunities, actually, and we're going to take it through the transaction end of opportunities. We're going to go straight across.
Beautiful. So do join her at 3 o'clock. And then for those of you in Ignite, stay on it for 4 o'clock. Eric, last question to you. Go for it.
Thank you, Rick. Very quickly for Debbie, is it the same link to join as in the email from Adonis or another link?
A Zoom, my KW Zoom room. Right?
Okay, thank you. Rick, maybe I missed it, but the first thing I put in the chat was, can you, for instance, in the comments in the MLS, I indicate that you don't take any offers below listing price?
So that's a great question. I'd have to review the whether or not the MLS would allow that. I'm not sure strategically that I think that that's a smart move, because I think it could prevent some people from making an offer. You want as many people in the conversation as possible. And so if people are looking to make an offer at or below the list price and they're guided not to in the MLS, you may reduce the number of offers, which puts the seller in less of the driver's seat. So I'm not sure. I have to think through if there's a positive to this strategy, and I'm not sure that you can even do it. I'd have to verify that.
Well, it happened to my daughter. I helped her buy a house last summer before I moved here, and the asking price was actually the real estate agent said, we don't accept offers below that. This is just a starting indication for bids, and it was a bidding war.
Yeah, the seller can certainly make that determination and ask the way I would do it. If my seller said to me, that's the deal, we would have a conversation around how that might skew things down for them. They might have buyers that not show up that could show up otherwise. And yet, if that's what the seller chose, right, I'm to follow the seller's lawful instruction. And so I would choose to do that verbally as people called to say, hey, I think I have an offer for you. I would choose to address that one-on-one with buyer's agents than make some kind of blast announcement in the MLS, even if you could do it. Debbie.
I think that's extremely particular to today's market. And I'll tell you what, we all have to remain very humble about this business, because as fast as it's become this market, it can become that market. I would be against it myself, just because I think it misdirects people's thoughts.
Okay, thanks for the advice.
Sure thing. Guys, I hope this was helpful. Have an awesome afternoon. We'll see you at 3 and at 4. And if we don't see you this afternoon, we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We have a special guest coming and joining us at 9 o'clock tomorrow, so don't miss that. Have a lovely afternoon. See you soon.
Thank you.